Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us here at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. Today I want to talk about the important distinction we have introduced in prior episodes between teaching and training and how understanding that difference can actually change the way you live as a Christian. We've been talking about this distinction because teaching, as we could typically think of it, even as our own experience as being taught by others, or if you're teaching young people or teaching Sunday school or teaching at some capacity, even teaching your own kids, we typically think of teaching as imparting information, right? Blah, 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 blah. Here are the facts, just the facts, man. Training is very different. Training is about preparing for a battle. So I've written a book called Cold Case Christianity. I've written a book called Forensic Faith, the latest book in this trilogy of Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, and Forensic Faith. Cold Case Christianity is the case for Christianity, of course. God's Crime Scene is the case for theism, the existence of God. And Forensic Faith is really the case for making the case. And I'm trying to provide 4 principles that first responders employ. And that's what is in the contents of Forensic Faith. It is the case for why we ought to be more evidential as Christian believers. And the 4 principles I'm employing is, number 1, understand what is your duty. We have a duty to make the case for Christianity. Number 2, train. Train to get better at what your duty is. And 3 is learn to investigate, and 4 is learn how to communicate what you've learned as an investigator. So I'm really talking about the second section of this book, the training section. So today's topic is simply going to be to talk about how important it is to test yourself as a Christian. Because it really is the first in a model I'm offering, a training model, T-R-A-I-N, train, how to train. The first, the T, is for testing. And I'm offering a training model because the difference between teaching and training is so dramatic. We teach to learn something, to teach something. We train to get ready for the calendared challenge that we know we're going to face. So for example, I offer this as an illustration in the book. You can take a look at it. There's a difference between teaching something on the chalkboard, for example. If I was going to teach you how to wrestle, I could actually just teach it to you by way of illustration on a chalkboard. Teach you all those principles. That's great. But that's not the same as getting on the mat and actually practicing what it is that we just talked about. As a matter of fact, in training days that first responders take, and this is one of the things that is unique to first responders, I doubt that many other professions have as consistently scheduled training. We are all certified state by state. In California, it's post-certification, Peace Officer Standards and Training. And the post-certification requires you to be trained every so often. And we have this repeated, and our agency actually has a much higher bar than post-certifications. So we're constantly training in every aspect of what we're going to do on a daily basis. So in terms of our range skills, our grappling skills, our communication skills, our report writing skills, our driving skills, these are things that our interviewing skills, these are things that we're constantly training so we can be the best we can possibly be, knowing that we're going to actually apply those skills tomorrow. And you're going to, when you do driver's training and you're driving around in a pursuit course, there's a good chance you're going to use that training sometime in the next month, chasing somebody. So you pay attention because you're going to need these skills. And once you know that there's an event around the corner, a challenge around the corner waiting for you, you take the teaching differently than you would if you didn't have that calendared event or that expectation that you're actually going to apply the teaching. This is what turns teaching into training. It's the application that you're going to put in place around the corner. The calendar is what changes teaching to training. And there's a process in which we prepare young recruits in any first responder discipline, if it's medicine, fire, or law enforcement, that I want to share with you today, because I think once you learn the T part of train, you will start to think about how you can do this better, both as an individual and as a church body. If you're a church leader or somebody who just loves the church, as we all do, you may want to help churches start to shift toward this model as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today, this need for testing. And we'll do that right after the break.
I have the great honor, really, of speaking to church groups all over the country. And maybe about a year into doing that, I started to think, well, I've got this opportunity to ask some questions too, right? Not just give all the answers, but I want to ask some questions. And the question I became most fond of is, hey, everyone here, stop for a second. Tell me, why are all of you Christians? Why are you a Christian? And some people are hesitant to even give you an answer, but those who did give me answers, after a while I realized, wow, they're coming back in the same categories over and over and over again. I'm learning something about why the church, why people in the church think Christianity is true from their answers. The most popular answer I get by far is, I was raised in the church, or my parents were Christians, something like that, right? Where they just have always known Christianity because they were raised that way. Okay, great. That's a good reason to be a Christian. I have no problem with that. Number two, I've had some experience that confirmed for me that Christianity was true. A prayer was answered, someone was healed. Something happened that I saw that confirmed for me in my own experience that Christianity is true. Okay, great. That's another good answer. Another kind of similar to this second is the third, which is, I used to be a jerk, and then I met Jesus and I'm not so much a jerk anymore. Jesus changed me. That's a good answer. The fourth is sometimes theological. Well, I didn't make this decision at all. It was God who worked through the Holy Spirit to bring me to Him. It's offered as some kind of theological response. Perfect. That's all true. Great. Those are the four answers I get. And you might look at those four answers and say, okay, that's interesting. But then it dawned on me. I have a family that is mostly atheists, but I do have a few believers in my family, but they're not Christian believers. They're Mormon believers. They were raised as LDS church members, Latter-day Saints. And if you were to ask my Mormon family, why are you a Mormon? Do you know what they say? Exact same answers and virtually the same order. Now, it turns out that most of us who are Christians who have examined Mormonism will agree that Mormonism is not true. It is not historically true. It's not factually true. Yet their answers sound just like ours as Christians. They hold to a faith that I think is actually unreasonable because we now have evidence to demonstrate that it's not true. Yet they hold to it. And they come to that belief in the exact same way that most of us as Christians have come to our beliefs. Now, it turns out there's a big difference between Mormonism and Christianity, in that you could actually make a case evidentially for Christianity, which you can't do for Mormonism. So my question is, if that's one of your answers, it's been one of your answers, why would you want to stop there? Because that's the answer that every believer of every religious faith gives. We could all give those answers. But if you're a Christian, you could actually articulate scientific reasons for why God exists. You could articulate historical facts that demonstrate the historicity of Jesus, the historicity and reliability of the Scripture. You could do all of that if you chose to. But you'd have to decide to move from an unreasonable faith and move from a blind faith to a forensic faith.
Training is so important, and testing is so important as part of the first step toward any training goal. You don't know where you are in the process until you assess what your skill set is. Let me give you an example of this. We have a bar in our city that is a kind of a biker bar, in the sense that it's always on Friday, Saturday nights. We get a lot of calls for service there. Bar fights are occurring. There's some people there who would kind of kick up a fuss over all kinds of issues. They get insulted, a friend would insult another friend, and two good friends would be fighting. And you get called out for service there. And if you are training a training car, Now, training cars for us include 2 officers, the field training officer, the FTO, and the trainee. The trainees probably just come out of the academy. We have a 7-month training course once you get out of the academy. So you're a brand new officer. You're not going to, that 16 weeks you spent in the academy, well, that doesn't really get you ready. You now need 7 months of practical experience. Again, what they're doing in the academy is teaching. What we're doing in the field is training. What's the difference? Well, now you're actually got to get out of the car. You're going to actually have to get in the fight. It's the propensity to have to get in the fight that changes everything. Whatever you learned in the classroom, in the academy, that's one thing. But when you're driving around with your FTO and he's talking to you about something, you're paying attention in a different way. Why? Because you're going to have to jump out of the car in a few minutes and put it into work. In this particular bar where we have all these fights, training cars will buy those calls. So I don't care what part of the city you're working in, when that call comes out, there's a bar fight at this particular bar, well, then we're going to dispatch your car, the FTO and the trainee. And when they get there, they're going to hop out of the car. And guess what the FTO, for the most part, at least to what's safe at least, he'll keep safety in mind. But for the most part, the FTO is going to sit there with his arms crossed and watch to see how the trainee does. Because he wants to see if the trainee is ready to handle a bar fight, both with his verbal skills, how he can kind of calm down the situation. Is he able to do that? Is his command presence such that people pay attention to him and listen to him? These are things we're going to be looking at as he approaches this bar fight. And if you don't do well, let's say things kind of go south on you and before you know it, you're grappling with people and you're getting hurt, you're going to discover how good you are in these areas. You're going to discover, well, I didn't have the verbal skills to kind of keep that situation calm with just my voice. And if it goes south, you're going to see, well, I need to work in that area. Let me give you another way of looking at this. We have a training, a jiu-jitsu dojo in our city, and it's popular. And a lot of our officers actually use this dojo to train. And my son is one of those officers. And the first time he went, he came back to our house for dinner. He doesn't live with us, but he came over for dinner like a day or two later. And he walked in the door and he had a big mark on his neck. And I said, "Where'd you get the mark?" He says, "Well, I got out of the dojo." I got in there and I thought, I listened to what he said and we got down in scenarios and started grappling. And before I knew it, I had to tap out because the guy was choking me to death. And he had all these marks on his neck to prove it. And I thought, wow, they're taking this stuff seriously. I was like, well, yeah, this is serious fighting that you're going to have to do at the dojo. I said, okay, great. I see him like a month later. And he's got another different mark on his forehead. And I said, dude, you're not getting any better at this grappling stuff. He says, oh no, it took him like twice as long to get me to submit this time. And I had to laugh. Because the goal sometimes for officers who are grappling with somebody who's bigger or stronger than they are, and things just go crazy and you just get caught off guard, and before you know it, you're on the ground grappling with somebody. Well, if they're getting the better of you, sometimes all you're trying to do is hold on long enough for your partner to get there so this guy does not choke you out, take your gun and shoot you. So sometimes just being able to hold on twice as long is good enough. And the whole reason why he was better a month later is because he went the first day and got beat up. That first visit to the dojo was a test that exposed his weaknesses. It opened his eyes to where he needed to improve. That's the value that testing has. It's incredibly powerful. Let me show you an illustration from the book that I used to make this point. And it's pretty simple, right? Once you know how much you don't know, then you know where you need to bone up on this topic, what you need to learn. And then after you learn that, you'll become the kind of whatever it is you need to be. In this case, we're going to talk about in the context of your Christian maturity, your Christian life, our duty to be good case makers. Well, you're going to have to actually spend some time figuring out whether or not you can actually do that. Are you a good case maker? Can you answer the objections that are offered by people in the culture? The most common objections. Have you been somebody who all this time had a more accidental version of your faith? You happen to be here because you were raised in the faith. You never even looked at the evidence. I go all over the country. I'm always amazed at how many people will listen to a presentation on the evidence for Christianity and go, wow, I never knew there was that much stuff you could actually examine. I never knew the case was that good. That's something we need to change, right? Apparently these people became Christians the same way that my Mormon family became Mormons. They had an experience or they were raised in that system and they believe it's true. But having an experience, even that you had an experience you might attribute to the Holy Spirit, does not necessarily mean that that is a true experience of the Holy Spirit, because all of my Mormon family says the same thing. So we need to be more than just experiential. We need to be evidential. But how would you know what you need to learn? How would you know what the evidence is that you need to master? Well, you know that by taking a test. Now, what is the test? I used to train young people all the time in the setting of youth groups, and I would always ask for the first session, if I'm going to train your group, I need to test them first. So please don't introduce me as J. Warner Wallace, the apologist, the Christian. Introduce me as the local teacher at your university who's a philosophy professor who's also an atheist, and let me come in and try to make the case for atheism and push back on these young students and show them why I would think that Christianity is unreasonable as an atheist. And if I do that, and when I do that, the Christians who I'm kind of pushing it back against are really, in an hour, they're ready to fold up their chairs and go home. They've had enough. They are not able, they are not equipped, they are not ready to push back even from one guy pretending to be a professor standing in front of a group of 50. I once did this in front of a group of 300, and they were not, those students at a local Christian high school were not ready to answer the most simple objections that I could offer. And they felt discouraged. And when I finally revealed that I was not the atheist professor, that I was in fact the Christian who came to train them, they were so relieved. And then they were paying attention, because that didn't feel good. And they didn't do a great job. And not only that, they were kind of nasty toward me because they were getting frustrated. And those two attributes of being ill-equipped and kind of irritable made them feel like they needed to do something to get better in that area. So again, that test, let's go back to our illustration for a second. That test exposed for them what they didn't know. And now they became ready to learn. And that's why they were paying attention from that point on. And they got better. Now the question becomes, how can you do this on an individual level? How can you get yourself ready if you're not going to attend a role play, an atheist role play like I just described? If you're not going to be in the bar fight, how can you get ready to know, to test yourself so you can see where it is you need to train? We'll talk about that right after the break.
I did 26 years working casework, and the better half of that in the end was working cold cases. And those cases got on national media. I think I've been on Dateline more than any other detective in the country. And the people who are involved in the process, if it's not that show or other media shows, are not always believers, but they get a sense of, well, this guy can puzzle a case together. Not that I'm the only one who can do that, but you develop that skill set. If you're working in this industry, trust me, if you're out there watching this video, you know, if you're a cop, how to put a case together. So once you've demonstrated that, I think, for people, they may not agree with your conclusion, but remember, the evidence doesn't say anything. And science doesn't say anything. It's scientists and evidence evaluators that say something. So we're all looking at the same data points. We're all looking at the same evidence. I've got to draw an inference from the evidence, and I land it this way. Now, you may not agree with my inferences, but I think you can at least respect the fact that I've done the homework of presenting the evidence so an audience can assess it for themselves. So that's why I think I have supporters who don't agree with my inferences, but they respect the process. And that's one of the things I try to do uniquely in God's Crime Scene. I'm trying to give the readers not just here are the facts, but here are how detectives assemble facts to develop a case. Here are the processes, the rules that we obey, how we put a cumulative case together. How do we make cases? That's what I want you to come away with also, not just here are the facts, because you can get that out of any book. I want this to be unique in the sense that this is a book that not only gives you the data, but it instructs you on how to build a case, how to put the data together.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker.
Now, there are some practical ways and simple ways that you can actually see how you might fare and what it is you need to improve. And you probably already know these experientially if you've been spending any time at all on social media. You know that when you see on your stream, let's say you're on Facebook, for example, and you've got lots of friends maybe who have different political views than you. And so they're posting their political views on Facebook, and you're thinking to yourself, no, that's not right. And you want to say something, but sometimes you actually will say something and it doesn't go very well because you're not really equipped and prepared to be able to answer those objections or to be able to kind of make your case for what you believe politically. The same thing also happens with us theologically. Have you noticed, though, we're far more likely to post something we don't like about politics than to post some truth, typically, about what we believe as Christians from a Christian worldview? Why is that happening? We ought to be, but I guarantee you, if you were to start making proclamations about your Christian faith on your stream and your social media, it probably wouldn't be long before you started to get some pushback. And that would be a good way to see if you're ready to even answer the objections that might be raised by your friends and family on social media. But I wanted, as I was writing Forensic Faith, to be a little more strategic, to provide you with something that you could actually download, print out, that has a place for you to fill in, a test. I call it a Forensic Faith Readiness Review. A mechanism by which you might assess your own readiness, your own level of preparation. So I'll show you the image for this from the book, and then I want to read for you, as you're looking at this image, the kinds of questions that are on this. This takes 21 minutes to complete, and it has to be timed. So I want to see how quickly and again, you got to assess your own, you can't turn those into me, you're going to assess your own progress, but I think it'll be pretty obvious once you start to do it. So here are the kinds of questions that I'm asking in this 21-minute readiness review. First, I want you to start with 7 pieces of paper all lined, and you're going to ask these questions. Are you ready? Do you think you could answer these well, given only a few minutes to answer each question? Why are you a Christian? That's the first question. I want you to be honest about that. And just list that as a reason. And then what evidence, number 2, do you have to believe that God exists in the first place? 3, why do you trust what the Bible says about Jesus? 4, why would God send people to hell just because they don't believe in Jesus? 5, if God's all loving and all powerful, then why is there so much evil in the world? 6, if God is the creator of everything, who created God? And 7, why would a loving God command the total destruction of all of Israel's enemies in the Old Testament, including their children and livestock? Okay, simple questions, only 7. You got 21 minutes to answer those. Now, I've kind of broken them into categories. Number 1 was some very simple, basic, why are you a Christian questions, and a few of the common objections, really right now, the most common objections you're going to see on social media, right? Problem of evil, of Old Testament God, even the problem of hell, which can be in many ways people will mention also. It's always some problem, some version of the problem of evil typically you're going to get anyway. Now, the reason why I've structured this with 21 minutes and 7 questions is because I want you to see, as you look now back at your answers, I would ask you this. When you offered reasons why you're a Christian, were they experiential? Were they entirely experiential? Think about it. Were they your testimony of transformation? Were they, these are, by the way, those are good answers. But everyone can offer those kinds of answers. And then you're just pitting your experience and what brought you to Christ against the experience of your Mormon or Muslim or Buddhist family and what brought them to those worldviews. And if experience is what, now this is the kind of pluralistic world we live in, experience is an equalizer, it's very subjective. Is that where we want to stay? Especially when these worldviews teach opposite core truths. They can't all be right. They could all be wrong. Or one could be right. But they teach opposite things, so they can't all be right. They cannot coexist. And what happens when you offer simply experience is that can coexist. Your experience can coexist with everybody else's experience. And if we're just going to leave it there, well, this works for me. It's worked for me in the past. This is how I became, or whatever. Jesus said there's no way to the Father except through Him. If we believe that, then we have the single cure for spiritual death. There is no other cure. There is no other way to the Father. If we believe that, we need to be able to offer more. Now, I'm not suggesting you would never offer your experience. Of course you will, as part of a larger cumulative case that includes good evidence. Your experience is another piece of evidence. I'm not going to deny that. It's a good piece of evidence, but it has to be tested to see if it fits in the construct of the other evidence to know where that experience is really coming from, where it's grounded. So I would ask you to look at the first half of that readiness review and simply ask yourself, well, are my answers rather more experiential? Then go to the second section. How did you do when pushing back or helping people to understand the nature of hell and why a loving God would send anyone to hell? You mean to tell me that my grandmother, who's just not a believer, but is the sweetest lady you've ever met, but she's going to go to hell, yet somebody who's a mass murderer could decide on death row that he believes in Jesus, he gets to go to heaven? Come on. You need to be able to answer those kinds of... Now, you might be the kind of person, because you watch NRB, you read apologetics books, you even watch this show, you think, I can actually answer those last three questions pretty well. Well, then I would ask you to look into your 3-minute responses and ask yourself, how winsome is your response? Because the first step in any of this is, do I have the data? Can I even make a case? Great. But the second part of that process is my response gentle and respectful? There's two parts to this, right? Be ready to offer the reason for the hope you have, but with gentleness and respect. And sometimes we can do one well and not the other. So if you're somebody who feels like I can answer those questions, then I want you to evaluate your readiness in terms of the winsome nature of your readiness. Now look, I'm offering this, and by the way, you can go to forensicfaithbook.com. That's our website for this book, forensicfaithbook.com. Go there and you can download the readiness review as a PDF file. And it's ready to go with the lines to fill in the spaces. You can just print it out, open your thing, set the timer, get at it, and let's see how well you do. At the end, I want you to evaluate that kind of a testing process and ask yourself, so how ready are you? Are you now? Do you see the problem? Do you see what we need to work on? Would those answers you just gave on that piece of paper, would they persuade your own kids? If not, it's time for us to change the way we've been living as Christians. To move away from unreasonable ideas about belief in faith, move away from blind ideas about belief in faith, and move toward a forensic faith. I hope that helps you think more clearly about what you do believe as Christians. And I'll see you right back here next week on Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.